Every year, the Lions Festival of Creativity takes place in the south of France. In 2013, one agency invited a special guest to kick off their showcase, the British biologist and atheist Richard Dawkins.
You're not the first man I'd associate with a giant advertising festival on the south coast of France. So what are you doing here today?
I'm having a thoroughly good time. Saatchi invited me to take part in a little presentation, a kind of overture to the presentation of the various directors, which involves memes.
As Dawkins takes the stage, he explains the origin of the term meme, which he invented in 1976.
Successful genes, that is, genes that program embryos to develop into adults who successfully reproduce, automatically survive in the gene pool at the expense of genes that fail. The difference between successful and unsuccessful genes really matters because genes are replicators. They make accurate copies, which potentially last through evolutionary time. But genes aren't the only replicators. There are two kinds of replicator that we can leave behind us: genes and memes. Memes spread through human culture as genes spread through the gene pool. Memes can be good ideas, good tunes, good poems, as well as driveling mantras. Anything that spreads by imitation, as genes spread by bodily reproduction or by viral infection, is a meme.
Memes were conceived in one of the most pivotal scientific books of the 20th century. But over the past 2 decades, with the rise of the internet, their meaning has changed a bit.
An internet meme is a hijacking of the original idea. Instead of mutating by random chance before spreading by a form of Darwinian selection, internet memes are altered deliberately by human creativity. In the hijack version, mutations are designed, not random, with the full knowledge of the person doing the mutating. In some cases, this can take the form of genuinely creative art. But now that I think about it, mightn't somebody argue that all creative art comes about through something like a mutation in the mind? Mutation in the mind. Mutation in the mind. Mutation in the mind.
The rest of this presentation can only be described as the crucifixion of memes. Their hijacking by the internet has resulted in the death of their true potential. Instead of a new field of scientific inquiry, memes have become the digital currency of wit and sarcasm. In a way, Dawkins' acceptance of this profanity is natural selection at its finest.
Memes spread through human culture. Genes spread through the gene pool. An internet meme is a hijacking of the original idea.
This is the story of memes, their death and their resurrection.
What does it take to be a scientific pioneer? To reframe and popularize evolutionary theory. Professor Richard Dawkins is amongst Britain's most outspoken and prolific scientific thinkers.
I don't think he's quite in the Oxford English Dictionary yet, but it's almost at that level.
In the 1970s, he made his name with an explosive book that turned evolutionary thinking on its head.
It was a wonderful and radical new vision set out in sparkling prose, and above it all, this wonderful, wonderful metaphor, the selfish gene.
The Selfish Gene was a big deal, and it's arguably the most important book about evolution since the origin of species. According to Darwin, evolution was the survival of the fittest individuals. Natural selection was defined by individuals who pass on their genes to the next generation. On this view, there's no reason for altruism to exist, yet it's a behavior that occurs in both humans and animals. Why would herds of wildebeests defend each other's offspring? And why do worker ants serve their colony when they have no chance to reproduce themselves? In 1964, a biologist named William Hamilton was studying this very problem. He published 2 papers that would have a big influence on Dawkins.
What Bill Hamilton did in 1964 was to realize that what matters is not just reproduction, not just producing children, but assisting the survival of your own genes. Any gene that assists the survival of itself by working through sisters and brothers and nephews and nieces and so on, such a gene would propagate itself.
Though Bill Hamilton published his work in the mid-60s, it attracted little attention.
By studying Hamilton's models, Dawkins realized how natural selection could explain altruism. The fundamental unit of selection, and therefore of self-interest, is not the species, nor the group, nor even strictly the individual. It is the gene, the unit of heredity. The selfish gene made a compelling case for this gene-centered view of evolution. Dawkins classified genes as a kind of replicator, which distinguished them from the bodies that carry them as their vehicles or machines. The resulting worldview combined evolutionary theory with a kind of materialist existentialism. Genes are in you and in me. They created us, body and mind, and their preservation is the ultimate rationale for our existence. We are their survival machines. Statements like this foreshadowed the atheism that Dawkins became famous for, but he also had to follow his argument to its logical conclusion. If genes are just one kind of replicator, then what if evolution was happening with other replicators?
The term meme was invented by Richard Dawkins at the end of his best-selling 1976 book, The Selfish Gene. What he did in that book was to explain the idea that was then becoming popular in biology, that evolution is happening not for the sake of the species or even for the good of the individual, but is really for the sake of the selfish genes. It's all about selfish genes competing with each other, and the ones that are successful shape the world. But Dawkins was interested in universal Darwinism, the idea that there could be other replicators apart from genes. And as an example, he said, well, look around you in human life and culture. Every time we imitate somebody else, pass an idea from one person to another, it's being copied with variation and selection. It is a replicator. The ideas, the memes, the behaviors, the skills, the stories, the habits, all these memes are competing to get copied by our brains. We are meme machines copying the memes.
Dawkins had created a powerful analogy. Nature is to culture as genes are to memes. And with this analogy came the possibility of a meme-centered view of evolution, an alternative to genetics that made the human species its main focus. Instead of physical reproduction, memes would spread like viruses, infecting our minds and shaping our beliefs.
What's a virus? A virus is a string of nucleic acid with attitude. That is, there's something about it that tends to make it replicate better than the competition does. And that's what a meme is an information packet with attitude. Sometimes when people say, do memes exist? I say, well, do words exist? Are they in your ontology? If they are, words are memes that can be pronounced. Then there's all the other memes that can't be pronounced. They're different species of memes.
The enthusiasm for memes formed into a discipline known as memetics, and this graph shows how many papers mention that term. The ball got rolling in the 90s after 2 books by Dan Dennett, and Susan Blackmore's Meme Machine in 1999 had a foreword by Dawkins himself. An online journal of memetics ran from 1997 until 2005. The webpage is still online, but shows signs of being abruptly abandoned. One of the final articles published in the journal is The Revealed Poverty of the Gene Meme Analogy, why memetics per se has failed to produce substantive results. Bruce Edmonds criticized memetics for its extreme abstraction and over-ambition, offering this graph as proof that the enthusiasm for memes was dying. He declared the entire movement as a short-lived fad that will not be widely missed. And over the past 2 decades, it seems like Edmonds was right.
Is meme theory an exciting new framework to understand our culture and how we think?
No.
Amazing. That's it.
So
Thank you, everybody.
All right, fine. Let me elaborate a little bit about it. So meme theory, first of all, it's not even a theory. That's part of the problem. It is an analogy. As you said, it came out originally out of the selfish gene, Richard Dawkins, an analogy with the selfish gene. But the fact is that after a couple of books and a journal of memetics that was in print for a few years, actually electronic, for a few years, the whole thing just turned out into nothing. Nobody's publishing things about memes anymore. The Journal of Genetics folded many years ago because they didn't have anything else to say.
As for Dawkins, he still talks about memes on occasion, but only in terms of their analogy to genes.
Various objections have been raised to the theory of memes, and by the way, I should add that I only ever proposed it in order to downplay the gene as the only unit of natural selection. I wanted to say, look, you've just read this book, The Selfish Gene, which is all about genes as the level at which natural selection acts. It doesn't have to be that way. The level of natural selection is certainly not the individual organism, nor is it the group. But it could be some other kind of molecule on another planet, or it could be the meme on this planet. I wasn't intending it to be a contribution to the theory of human culture. Others have tried to make it so, which is fine. I'm delighted that they have. I mean, Dan Dennett and Susan Blackmore, for example.
Dawkins clearly didn't care if memetics survived or not. But I want to offer another explanation for the radical shift in our opinion of memes. If you make the statement, X is not a meme, well, guess what? It's now a meme. Just mentioning something to another person creates the chance for imitation and potentially evolution. This is because the meme is an absolute term, meaning that it's not dependent on or conditioned by, relative to, or restricted by anything. It's simply the name we've chosen for a unit of culture, where culture is an undefined variable. We can change the unit to fit any piece of information. All we know is that a meme must be a unit of something, and that something can be anything. Although this proves that memetics will never be a science, it doesn't mean that memes are a useless concept. But to use them properly, they must remain grounded in their analogy with genetics. Memes are replicators, and even if we don't know how they work, it is theoretically analogous to how genes work. They multiply, they interact, and ultimately they mutate. If it had been successful, memetics would have revealed how human culture mutates across generations, giving us unprecedented insight into the patterns of our social behaviors. To this day, Blackmore and Dennett continue to defend the value of this approach, and in part 2 of this 5-part series, their conversation will be joined by a new and powerful voice.
I really want to have this discussion about memes, by the way, because it's really a discussion that needs to be had. Dawkins would do well to read some Jung.
Seems to me to be complete nonsense. You're almost drunk on symbols. And
you could say that. It's like, okay, Dr. Dawkins, how far are you willing to take that?